All right, Panthers, welcome back. So, today we're going to talk about 1920s false hope. Last set of notes, we talked about this kind of overarching view of all of these weird kind of social histories of the 1920s. Today, we're going to focus more on political and especially the economic aspect of the 1920s. Um, because the 1920s, the way the 1920s go, leads us right into the Great Depression. The policies and the beliefs of the 1920s take us right to the Great Depression. It's also a period when idealism is seems to take precedence over realism. Americans want things a certain way; they believe things should be a certain way. However, that's not the way that really was going to be. So it's idealism over realism, and just some very overly idealistic economic beliefs that lead to this collapse of the economy. So here we go. Right away, Japan becomes a real problem for the United States after World War One. Japan becomes very imperialistic and was rapidly expanding its territory outside of its own country. And Japan desperately wants to build this Asian Pacific Empire. They want to dominate the Pacific Empire from the Asian coast all the way to the North American West Coast. And they're rapidly gobbling up land and going into China was a big goal of theirs. And they go into China. One of the areas they go into China is called Nanking. It's an area in China known as Nanking, and it's known as the Rape of Nanking. It is a literal and it is a figurative rape of Nanking. They would go in and take over these villages, the Japanese would, and they would basically kidnapped young girls from about the age of 8, 9, 10, all the way up into their early 20s. And then they would ship them all over the Pacific to be used as sex slaves at Japanese military bases throughout the Pacific. They would also go into these villages, and one of the ways that they would maintain control in the villages is that they would have all the people come out into a village square, and they would tell the Chinese people, "You're going to obey, do exactly what we tell you to do when we tell you to do it. If you don't, we're going to give you a demonstration. We're going to show you what we're capable of." And Japanese soldiers would go out into the Chinese crowd and they would take babies from the arms of the mothers and they would bring them up front. And then they would tell the Chinese, "You're going to watch what we're about to do. If you close your eyes or you look away, you will be executed, but you will also choose somebody from the villagers, other villagers, to die with you." At that point, they would take the babies up front and they would throw the babies into the air. And then they would catch the babies on the bayonets as they came down. So the Japanese were extraordinarily brutal people. During World War II, they are allies with Germany. And even Adolf Hitler was horrified at some of the things that the Japanese did. If Adolf Hitler thinks, "Hey, you're crossing the line there," it's pretty brutal. So the Japanese are rapidly expanding in the Pacific, and they're rapidly gobbling up land. And you can see from this yellow line here, this is the extent of Japanese expansion, right? They almost get to Pearl Harbor, and they see Pearl Harbor as the key to opening up the entire Pacific for Japanese expansion. So there's a lot of European countries, a lot of not just European countries, but a lot of Asian countries, North American countries, and European countries that own territory out here. They have land. And so they're worried about the Japanese kind of bumping into them and trying to take over their land and causing another war. So a series of treaties is signed, and it's 5 power, 7 power, 9 power treaties. Right? You don't need to know the countries, just know that a series of treaties is signed. Basically, what it says is Japan agrees not to take over anybody's territory. They're not the United States or England or France or whomever may have territory out there. The Japanese aren't going to try to take that over. And they agree to limit the size of their navies to hopefully take away some of the temptation to attack each other. Well, a lot of these countries, United States and England, kind of abide by this treaty. Japan mostly doesn't. Japan signs it, but they mostly ignore it and continue to expand and continue to build up their navy. Okay. And then I told you, some of the stories. Japan was really, really brutal in some of the things that they would do in the way that they would maintain control. This is a picture of Japanese soldiers. They're about to behead this man for some transgression. Another thing that they would do is they would take the heads of the people that they beheaded and they would line them along the roads going into the villages as a warning. Don't mess around. Oh boy. So one of the ways that the 1920s is representative of idealism over realism is the Kellogg-Briand Pact. So here's what's happening. In Europe, they're very worried about Germany. Germany is extraordinarily unstable at this time. Their economy is in shambles. People have a government that was forced on them by the Treaty of Versailles that the people don't like, people don't understand, the people don't want. Their economy, because of the Treaty of Versailles, is just absolutely destroyed. And so there's all these radical groups beginning to pop up in Germany, promising a new day, promising to fix a lot of problems. And a lot of them are promising to get revenge on the rest of Europe. Well, this really scares France because Germany loves to vacation in France. For whatever reason, every 20, 30 years, Germany invades France. I don't know. That's just what Germany does. And this really scares France. France is really worried that Germany is going to invade them again and come looking for revenge for the Treaty of Versailles. So the French foreign minister, his name was Aristide Briand, came to the United States and proposed, the Secretary of State, his name was Frank Kellogg. Right? You guys may have enjoyed some of his breakfast cereal this morning. No, that's a different Kellogg. Frank Kellogg has nothing to do with the cereal people. Aristide Briand, French foreign minister, visits the U.S. Secretary of State, and he wants to create a treaty which would make it against the law to go to war. He wants to outlaw war. Well, that's different. Now, at first, the United States government thought, well, that's a crazy idea. I mean, you can't outlaw war, right? I mean, that's just, how are you going to enforce this? This is just a bizarre, wackadoo, crazy idea. And the United States government kind of dismissed him at first. However, the people of the United States, right after World War I, really liked this idea. The United States, up to World War II, has traditionally been very isolationist. We just want to be left alone. And after the horrors of World War I, the United States is willing to try anything to try to avoid another war. Our economy is booming at this time. It's an unbelievable economic boom that is taking place. And the United States believes not only do we want to be left alone, but the only thing that's going to stop our economic boom would be another war. So once word about this proposal gets out, the American public really put pressure on the government to accept it. So Frank Kellogg goes back to Aristide Briand and he goes, well, maybe we'll sign it, but it's not going to do any good for just the United States and France to sign this. We've never gone to war. We're not even close to going to war. We need to get other countries to agree to this. So they invite in 31 other countries, 31 major powers in the world to sign the Kellogg-Briand Treaty, which outlaws war. It's called the International Kiss. Mwah, mwah, mwah. It's like one giant boulder. They just sit around in their Birkenstocks and they strum guitar and they sing Kumbaya, and it's just fantastic. Kellogg-Briand Pact outlaws war. Okay? Obviously, it doesn't work, right? But this is an example of the idealism of the 1920s, but it's not really very realistic of what's happening in the 1920s, right? It was not enforceable. What are you going to do if a country goes to war? Are you going to arrest the country? You're going to throw the whole country in jail? I mean, how do you do that, right? So it's very idealistic, not very realistic. And there's a newspaper outing the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, or not the Treaty of Versailles, the Kellogg-Briand Pact. And we're not going to have war anymore. Yay! Little do they know. All right, this is to 1928, which is an election year. Republicans nominate Herbert Hoover for president. Good old Herbie. Maybe your parents have one of his products in their home. Yeah, Hoover vacuums. This is the guy. No, it's not. He was actually a mining engineer. Herbie Hoover is he's a Republican nominee. He was a very, very capable government employee. He worked in the Wilson administration. He was responsible for feeding Europe. He figured out how to get food and distribute it in Europe to hungry civilians who were, starving because of the war. He serves in the Wilson administration, does great, and then he goes into the Harding and he goes into the Coolidge administrations and is very, very good at what he does. So the Republicans nominate him to be their president in 1928. Very capable public servant, right? He's very much, his beliefs are very much in line with the other Republican presidents of the 1920s. The government should do as little as possible. The government should not get involved in the economy. The government should not get involved in foreign policy. The government should not get involved in people's personal lives. The government should just remain very, very inactive. Called laissez-faire. Let the economy do what the economy does, right? Just let it be natural with as few restrictions as possible from the government. And that Herbert Hoover definitely believes that. Now, Herbert Hoover's campaign slogan is very reflective of the mood of the people, right? The economy's going great. Everything's great. This is a fantastic time to live in America. His campaign slogan is a chicken in every pot and a car in every garage. Oh. So what does that mean? Well, here's what it means. A chicken in every pot means everybody's going to have food, right? Meaning poverty is going to be a thing of the past. Everybody's going to have food to eat. A car in 1928 represents luxury. Not only are your basic needs going to be met, shelter and food, but you're going to have enough money to buy other things, luxury items, like a car. Hoover says that poverty is going to be a thing of the past. Soon there will be no more poverty. Everybody's making money. Everybody's doing great. Pretty soon we will have no more poor people, and everybody's just going to have money. And Hoover easily wins in 1928, and there's a flyer from the Herbert Hoover campaign. Herbert Hoover absolutely destroys the Democratic nominee. So now we get our third Republican president of 1920. We get Warren G. Harding, Calvin Coolidge, now Herbert Hoover. All of them have very, very similar beliefs on what the government can do and should do, especially around the economy, and that's to do as little as possible. All right, so why is the economy booming? In large part, it's because of the stocks. The stock market is just skyrocketing at this time. And it seems like all you got to do is just put a little bit of money in the stock market, let it go, and in a very short period of time, you'll more than double your money that you put into the stock market. Now, remember, the stock market is kind of like gambling a little bit. I guess you're when you buy stock, you're buying part ownership in a company, and you're loaning money to that company, right? You're in exchange for a stock, you're giving the company money, and that company is going to take that money and invest it back into itself and hopefully create new and better products and ways of doing business. So the stock market is just going bonkers at this time, right? And people are um, using the stock market really as a savings account. A lot of people stop saving money and they just put their money, their extra money, into the stock market, believing that the stock market is always going to go up, which it had been throughout the 1920s. The problem was there are people out there who understand the stock market much better than everyone else. And they come up with all sorts of inventive ways to manipulate the stock market in their favor and hurt the average investor in return. One of the most popular ones, one of the most famous ones, is known as a stock pool. So, in a stock pool, wealthy investors who understand the stock market would choose a stock to invest in. The stock, whatever stock it was, it didn't matter, right? The stock didn't matter. All they were going to do is just randomly pick a stock, and then they're going to pool their money together. And since they're wealthy, they have a lot of money to pool. And then all of a sudden dump it into the stock, buy as much stock as they can with this money that they pool. Okay, once that happens, causes the stock price to go up. Supply and demand. When demand is high, prices go up. All of a sudden, there's a high demand for the stock, prices go up, right? So now the value of this stock is beginning to rise. Other investors who really don't understand what's going on, they just know you can make a lot of money in the stock market. They see the stock price begin to rise. They go, oh, this is a good stock. Prices are going up. I'm going to put my money in there while the price is going up. So other investors who don't know or understand about the stock pool put their money into the stock. This causes price to go up even more because now there's even more demand to this stock. Now, what these people don't know is that the stock poolers, the people who started this stock rise, this stock price rise, they have a ceiling price, and they're watching the price of this stock, and they have a ceiling price, meaning when the stock gets to that price, when the stock rises to that price, they're going to sell everything that they have. When the stock price hits that ceiling, when the stock hits that ceiling price, the stock poolers are going to sell off their stocks, pull all their money out. They're going to make a really, really good profit. And now, since all of that money is gone, the demand has gone down, the price of that stock is going to drop. Stock poolers walk away with a lot of money. The other people who bought into the stock as it was beginning to rise, right, they're going to lose money because the price of the stock is now going to go down below where they bought at. So, for instance, let's say the American Desk Company is going to be targeted by these stock poolers. And for every share of stock, it costs $5. Okay. Stock poolers get in, they pool their money, they dump it into the American Desk Company. And there's this huge demand for the stock now, shooting the price up from $5 to $20. So now they have a $15 increase. Other people get into buy into the stock because now it's had this dramatic increase, right, from $5 to $20. So they went in on this. More people put their money in because now there's even more money. The price goes up to $30. Okay. Now, stock poolers, they have a ceiling price. That's $30. Okay. Stock poolers have already decided when American Desk Company gets to $30, we're going to sell our stock. The American Desk Company hits that ceiling price. The stock poolers sell off the stocks that they have, pulling out their money. Lack of demand causing the price to go down. Stock price is going to go down to $15. It's not going to go all the way back down to $5 because other people have bought in since then. But the stock price drops down to $15. So the stock poolers will have walked away making a profit of $25 per share. They bought at 5, sold at 30. They're making a profit of $25 for every share that they bought. And if they bought thousands of shares, they're looking at a profit of tens of thousands of dollars. Other investors who bought at $20 or at $25 or wherever, right? They lose that share. If they bought at $20, price goes down to $15, they've now lost $5. If they sell that stock, they're going to lose $5 for every share that they bought. The most famous stock pooler, the guy who makes a lot of money off of this, the guy who understands the stock market pretty much better than anyone. And he did all kinds of crazy games to manipulate the stock market. And he dramatically increases his wealth. And he was already a pretty wealthy guy to begin with, was Joe Kennedy. Our friend Joe Kennedy, the father of John Kennedy, Teddy Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy. He's the one who smuggled alcohol from Europe during Prohibition, makes a lot of money. He then takes this money and he begins to run these stock market games and makes even more money. Hokey smoky. All right, so let's collapse the stock market here. Okay. So banks begin to stop doing traditional banking services. Stop making loans to regular customers, right? That's how banks make money. You deposit money into the bank then takes the money that you deposit and they loan it out to other people. And then those people pay back the loan plus interest, and that's how the bank makes money. Well, banks stop making loans to regular customers because they're limited by law how much interest they can charge on loans, right? So they can only charge so much interest on a loan, which limits their profits. Banks go, what if we took our investors' money, right? People who deposit money in our bank, what if we took that money and instead of loaning it to other people, what if we took that money and we invested it in the stock market, where we, instead of making maybe a 5 or 10% interest on this loan, on this money, maybe we can make 100, 200, 1,000% interest on this money. So they begin to invest depositors' money into the stock market. Another thing that they did was that they would loan money out to stockbrokers, and this was called buying on the margin. They would loan money to stockbrokers, and there was no laws limiting the amount of interest that they could charge on these types of loans. So this is going to get really confusing, so you got to kind of stick with me here. So here's what would happen. Banks would loan money to stockbrokers. Stockbrokers are people that buy stocks for people. People call up the stockbroker, I want to buy Coca-Cola stock. And the stockbroker will go out and make that purchase for them. So banks would loan money to stockbrokers. Okay. In this type of loan, they can charge higher interest rates than they could on regular loans, right? Again, regular loans are controlled. The rates of interest on regular loans are controlled by law. In these loans to stockbrokers, there is no law controlling how much interest can be charged. So banks can charge stockbrokers higher interest rates. Okay. Investors would then call up the stockbroker, say, I want to buy Coca-Cola stock. The stockbroker will say, great, that stock costs $100. And the investor goes, oh, gosh, I don't have $100. I wish I did. The stockbroker goes, don't worry about it. I just got some money from the bank. I just got $100 from the bank. I'll loan it to you, right? The stockbroker gets the money from the bank on a loan. The stockbroker is now going to loan it to the investor to buy this stock, right? Stockbroker is going to charge a higher interest rate to the investor than he's being charged by the bank, because then the stockbroker is going to make money on this and he can pay off the bank. Okay. So here's what it looks like. Let's say banks loan money to a stockbroker at 10% interest. So if they loan $100, 10% interest, stockbroker is going to pay back $110. Investor calls up, says, I want to buy Coca-Cola stock. Great, it's $100. I don't have $100. Stockbroker says, don't worry. I just got $100 from the bank. I'll loan you that $100. Stockbroker is being charged 10% interest by the banks. Stockbroker is going to charge the investor 20% interest. Okay. So the investor, what's hoped here, the investor is going to hold on to Coca-Cola stock until it goes to $150. Then he can sell the Coca-Cola stock, $150. He can pay back the $120 that he owes to the stockbroker. Stockbroker can pay back the $110 that he owes to the bank. Bank makes $10. Stockbroker makes $10. The investor makes $30. Everybody makes money in this. Okay. Now, here's the catch. There's not any terms for the loan, meaning that this loan doesn't need to be paid back in regular installments, right? You go buy a car, you go buy a house, you know you have to pay this amount of money every single month, right, to pay off the loan. None of that exists on this buying on the margin loan. The belief is we'll just let it ride, right? We're not going to worry about it. Pay it back whenever you can, right? There's no regular payments. There's no actual payoff date. Just pay it off when you can. Okay. Again, the hope is that the stock will rise. The investor can sell it off at a higher rate. They can pay off the stockbroker. Stockbroker can pay off the bank, and everybody's going to make money in this. That's the hope. However, there is a provision in this loan that says that the loan must be paid in full if it's called, right? If the loan is called, you have to pay back everything you owe immediately, okay? The bank would literally, it's called calling the loan, because the bank would literally call the stockbroker. Dude, I need my money right now. I'm calling the loan. And the stockbroker would have to pay back that money that he borrowed from the bank immediately. If that happens, the stockbroker probably is going to call the investor. Dude, I need my money right now. And the investor would have to pay back the money to the stockbroker immediately. Okay, this is called calling the loan. That provision is in this loan paperwork, right? There's no regular payments or payoff date or anything. We're just going to let it go until you can pay it off. However, if the loan is called, you got to pay it back. Okay. So this is how the buying on the margin works. Banks loan the money to the stockbrokers. Stockbrokers loan the money to the investors. Investors hoping that this goes up at as much as possible. Investors can sell that stock, pay back the stockbrokers. Stockbroker can pay back the banks. Everybody makes money. If the loan is called, bank calls the stockbroker, they got to pay it back immediately. Stockbroker calls the investor got to pay it back immediately. Probably that's never going to happen until it does. Okay, so here we go. Let's collapse the stock market. Wednesday, October 23rd, 1929. There's a big sell-off in the stock market. People who kind of know the stock market understand there's too much money in the stock market, that it's overvalued, prices are too high. And so a lot of these investors who understand that want to get out. So they sell off a bunch of their stocks on October 23rd, and the prices of the stock market tumble. October 24th. Now other investors who have seen the stock prices take this big tumble on the 23rd, they panic and go, I got to get out. They sell off as much as they can. And again, prices fall. So now government and business is very worried because they know there's a lot of money tied up into the stock market here, right? And if the stock market collapses, this could be an economic crisis, the likes of which we've never seen, right? There's so much money tied up in the stock market. So government and businesses get together and they pool their money together, kind of like a stock pool, and they dump they then dump this money into the stock market and buy a bunch of stock. And they come out and say, look, everything's fine. Prices were just correcting. This is just a natural thing that happens in the stock market. Prices go up and prices come down. This was a natural correction. Everything's fine. If we didn't think it was fine, we certainly wouldn't be putting our money in the stock market. So don't panic. And it works, right? Friday, the October 25th, things seem relatively calm. Prices kind of level off. There's no big selling. There's no big trading. Seems like people have kind of calmed down. Then comes the weekend, and investors think over the weekend. I don't like the stock prices going up and down, and I think I'm just going to get out. October 28th, stock market opens up, and again, investors go, "Yeah, I'm just pulling my money out. I'm getting out right now," and prices fall even more. Oh boy! And then October 29th, 1929, Black Tuesday. There is a massive sell-off that takes place. 16.4 million shares of stock are sold. And even more are put up for sale than that. There's just not enough people to sell to. Nobody's buying. Everybody's trying to sell. And so as everybody's trying to sell their stock, right, prices just continue to fall as they're looking for somebody to buy that stock. Right? Prices go. If you've ever seen, the stock market, the stock exchange, where these guys are running around the floor and they've got a phone to their ear and they're waving pieces of paper, those are guys trying to sell stock. They're looking for people to buy stock. And if nobody's going to buy their stock, they got to keep dropping the price lower and lower and lower and lower. Well, October 29th, there's such a massive sell-off. It is chaos on Wall Street. Absolute chaos on Wall Street because everybody's scrambling around trying to sell stock and find a buyer before somebody else gets the buyer, and prices are just tumbling. In the chaos, there was a guy he was a World War I veteran who had his leg blown off, and his leg was kicked off. He had a prosthetic leg. He had a fake leg. It was kicked off in the melee of these people rushing around trying to sell stock, and they never found his leg. How do you lose a leg? But he did, right? So it's just crazy. In a matter of hours, there are people across the country who lost everything. They woke up. There were people that woke up in the morning, on the morning of October 29th, who were multi-millionaires. Multi-millionaires that morning. That night, they went to bed. They had absolutely zero money because everything that they had, every dime that they had to their name was in the stock market. Billions of dollars evaporated in this because it was money that just existed on paper, right? On paper, it said they had this much money, but it was all tied up in stock. And as long as the stock prices are high, they had that money. But when the stock prices collapse, they didn't have that money. So how does this, what we just talked about, the selling on the margin, how does that all fit in? Okay, here's how it fits in. Stock prices begin to tumble. The bank realizes, all of our depositors' money is tied up in the stock market. We got to get out. They call the stockbroker. The bank says, dude, we need our money. Stockbroker goes, I don't have your money, but I know who does. Let me call my loan. Stockbroker calls the investor. I need my money. I loaned you my money. I need my money now. I'm calling the loan. The investor goes, oh, wait a minute. I don't have the money, but I know who does. My bank. So they go to the bank. I need my money back. And the bank says, I don't have it. I'm on the phone to my stockbroker. Stockbroker says, I don't have it. I'm on the phone to my investor. Investor goes, I don't have it. I'm in line at the bank. Whole thing collapses. Because of this, most Americans, pretty much every American is going to be affected by the stock market. Most Americans never own one share of stock. But most Americans have money in the bank. And because of this entire scenario, people lose their entire life savings. They've never owned any stock, but they deposit it into a bank that then use that money to buy stock. And people who had been saving for 30, 40 years to retire, people who had been saving to buy a house, all of a sudden lost everything. The bank lost their money. Oh boy. All right. As word got out, investors couldn't meet the call from the bank. People went to the bank. This was called a run on the bank. People went to the bank to get their money before their money was gone. Right? Banks literally didn't have the money to pay them back. The money just wasn't there. So people who had never owned stock, this is what I was just telling you, they never owned stock, they're completely broke now. Their entire life savings vanished. Just gone. By 1933, 5,000 banks had shut down. Oh boy. So if you don't have money, you don't buy things. If you don't buy things, demand for products goes down. When demand for products goes down, people lose their jobs. The companies go out of business or they lay people off. When people lose their jobs, they're not making any money, which means they're not buying. If you're not buying, that means demand goes down, which means more people lose their job, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on and on, right? No money, no buying, no buying, no job, no job, no buying, no buying, no job. And it just went on and on and on and on and on, right? By 1932, 13 million people are out of work. Woof! Hokey smoky. And once wealthy businessmen are now completely broke. And this is a guy, he's selling off this car. This would have been a very, very high-end luxury car. And this guy had everything he had tied up in the stock market. And this guy is now trying to sell this car for $100 just so he can have enough money to feed his wife and kids. Oh boy, this is bad. All right, so the government decides to try to fix this. I mean, and bless their heart, they tried. So what they do is they sign into law a tariff. Now, a tariff is a tax on imported goods. The idea is if we have a tariff on imported goods, goods coming into the United States, if we put this tax on it, then people will not buy foreign-made goods. They'll buy American-made goods. And this will increase demand for American-made goods, and then maybe we can stop this reverse snowball effect, right? We increase demand, people get jobs. People have jobs, they have money, they begin to buy, right? So that's the idea. Make imported goods too expensive so people can buy domestic-made goods. Big problem with that. Nobody has any money to buy anything, so nobody's buying anything. However, this creates a trade war. If we put a tariff on foreign-made goods, goods coming from other countries to the United States, what do you think other countries are going to do? Yep, they're going to put a tariff on American-made goods. So what little was being sold overseas in the United States, or what little was being sold overseas made by the United States, is gone. Nobody's buying American-made goods. So now that hurts the American economy even more because now there's nobody in other countries buying it. And the economy gets worse. So you can see, right here, right in here, that's the Great Depression, right? Right there is where it happens. Or excuse me, right here. This is the Great Depression. Okay. We passed the Smoot-Hawley tariff. Oh boy, it just gets worse. Oh, this is not good. All right, so Americans we're now in a Great Depression. We don't have jobs. We don't have money. It's just a horrible, horrible economic mess. And people blame the president. The president always gets the blame, whether it's his fault or not. President always gets the glory, whether it's his to take or not. In this case, Herbert Hoover is going to get the blame. It's not really Herbert Hoover's fault. Herbert Hoover inherited a mess. He inherited a house of cards, and he just happened to be there when the whole thing collapsed. Right? All of this was set up by the economic policies, the laissez-faire economic policies, hands-off economic policies of Harding and Coolidge. Hoover just happens to be there. Now, once it happens, Hoover doesn't do much to fix it. But Hoover is the president when all this happens, so he's going to get the blame. Homeless people, people who are now homeless, begin to move into homeless communities, and they're just shacks of shacks built out of whatever they could find, cardboard or tin or wood scraps or whatever, and they would live in these homeless communities. Well, because this is Hoover's fault, they called these homeless communities Hoovervilles. They were homeless because of Hoover, and that's a picture of a Hooverville there. There's a picture. This is actually New York City. This is Central Park there. And that, Central Park had a very large Hooverville, and you can see it there. Homeless people began to use newspaper as bedding, as blankets, and as sheets. And when they did this, they called those Hoover blankets. Because again, they were homeless because of Hoover. And people who were poor, who had no money, often would pull their pockets inside out and walk with their pockets out. And those were called Hoover flags. They hated Hoover. This was all Hoover's fault. And this is the beginning of the Great Depression. All right, Panthers, that's it. That's how the Great Depression kind of starts. And obviously, that's where we're headed next. Until next time, you guys have a good time. See you later.